Hi, good morning. Oh, sorry, afternoon. Hi, everyone. This is so surreal for me. I mean, it's a place that starts on time. It's clockwork and all that. Um, Sometimes, really. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, the war on traffic. Let's start with that. Firstly, it's great to see so many people show up. I understand this is a very big turnout. And I think the reason it's a big turnout is because traffic is the great equalizer. It affects all of us. It's blind to your race, religion, sexuality. It doesn't matter. You're gay, straight, black, white, Asian. We all suffer through it. And the problem that I see here is it's so serious. It affects all of us, but we don't take it anywhere near as seriously as we should be taking it. Now, if it were up to me, I would be declaring a state of emergency on our roads here in Metro Manila, at least. That's how serious I think it is. Now, that might sound a little radical to some of you. State of emergency sounds so crazy, but is it? If you think about it, if there was anything else, whether it was a pandemic, a virus outbreak of some sort, or an enemy that landed on the Philippine shores and threatened the Filipino people and all of us and cost us 3 billion pesos a day, you don't think that the government would come out and say, stop everything? The World Health Organization would come in, the Department of Health would come in, they'd bring out the National Guard, everyone stay at home till we fix this problem. They would, right? If it was a pandemic or some kind of foreign enemy that arrived on our shores, I guarantee you nothing would move until we fix that problem. But yet with traffic, it is an enemy, it is a pandemic, it is costing us 3 billion pesos a day, it's affecting our health, our well-being, our productivity, among many other things. And yet we talk about it like it's the weather. Like there's nothing we can do about it. Ganun talaga eh. Matapik sa EDSA. No, it doesn't have to be that way. So before I get going, I just need to all be on the same page. I think the whole country, or at least the capital cities, like Metro Manila, should all be on the same page on how seriously we take traffic. Because if we don't get on that same page, we're not going to get anywhere, because the solutions that I'm proposing are going to be radical. Now, just a disclaimer, they're radical, they're crazy. Some of you might think that's just too much, but it's the same concept. It's like when you go into a car show and you see a concept car. It's not really going to roll out the factory floor like that. It's to make you think. It's to elicit reactions, create a conversation about it. You might like one design element, and hey, if that's all we got from the concept car, that's great. And this is what I'm hoping to achieve with some of these talks, is that through the dialogue, we can get some answers. It's only through the questions that we're really going to get the answers. So, this current administration under Secretary Tugade, who, by the way, I think is a good guy. I think he's a great guy. He's got a background in logistics. His heart's in the right place. He is trying, and he's put plans for decentralization, for mass transit, and that is great, because you cannot have a conversation about traffic without having those two at the very heart of that conversation. It has to be decentralization, mass rapid transit system. No other way around that. So, he is supposedly leading that charge. But if that happens in 10 years, we're very lucky. It's nowhere near 10 years. We're talking 15, 20 years maybe away before we have a subway and we start decongesting and moving over to Clark and other big cities outside of the Metro Manila. So what I'm here to talk about is the short to medium-term goals. These are things that we could do tomorrow and could have an impact as soon as next month. The month after it'll be better, and then the month after that better and better and better. I'm talking about waging this war on traffic using technology as our weapons. We already have them. And the greatest part about it is we already embrace this technology. We're not going against the grain, it's organic. I'm talking about ride sharing, and I know I sound like a broken record when I say this. If anyone's followed my page or seen me speaking in the Senate, you'll know that I'm very passionate about this because it works. I'm not saying ride sharing in general like I'm some kind of Uber advocate. No, I mean, I know Uber doesn't work everywhere in the world, and that's fine. But you know where Uber works? Or Grab or Lyft? It works in cities that are fractured and broken, that need healing. And if there's only one good thing we can get out of Metro Manila in the state that it's in, it's so bad we can't break it any more than it's broken now. We can take that, right? That's one positive, because sometimes the risk is you might break something that wasn't broken, or you're trying to fix something that's not broken. We can't break it any more than it's broken now. So we can afford to think outside the box and be radical with the solutions. When I say ride sharing, it's because when we look at a greater city or urban area like Metro Manila, or any capital city around the world, the number one source of congestion will always be the private car. And that is only because pound for pound, the space that it takes up versus the amount that it moves, it's inefficient. But it's very convenient. Now, worldwide, they all developed their cities to favor the private car. Now they're undoing that. Most cities have started to undo that. I think Amsterdam was one of the pioneers of that, when they really thought long time ago and said, no, we're going to prioritize biking, we're going to prioritize walking, we're going to prioritize public transportation. So they started taking less and less space, or more and more space, away from the cars and giving it back to the people into those forms of transport. In the Philippines, especially in Metro Manila, we are still private car centric. Our infrastructure is all geared up that way. So it's going to be an uphill climb. So the solutions I'm proposing is to try to suit what our problems are here. If we can't get the infrastructure done in the next 20 years to be able to get more bike paths and more pedestrian crossings or pedestrian walkways, elevated walkways, and mass rapid transit systems, let's zero in on that problem of the private car addiction. And ride sharing is there to do that, because what it will effectively do, and this is in theory, you have one Grab or Uber car servicing roughly 15 to 20 people. You can't tell me that that car won't take away 4 to 5 cars off the road. As it's happening now, because the argument I get is, but you know, they're adding more cars to the road. Yes, they are. I agree with that. But we haven't experienced the magic of it yet, because we haven't seen what it takes away yet. And the reason it hasn't taken away any cars yet is because it's not stabilized. If you don't stabilize it, people are not going to give up their private cars. People will still buy that second car for coding, right? It's the same principle as when, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but before DVDs, before Netflix happened and Spotify. Not me, but I had a friend that used to go to Makati Cinema Square in Green Hills, right? And this friend, Mika, used to buy her DVDs there, right? And go to these dodgy sites where you could download the torrents. Now, before Spotify came in and Netflix and took over that space, and for a certain amount you've got access to this whole library now, people would be going there. Now, when they stabilized Netflix and Spotify, that's the only time that I got my friend's DVD player and threw it out the window. I no longer need it. But when it wasn't there, and I wasn't sure if Makati Cinema Square was going to be closed down, or Green Hills, or the torrent sites, I kept my DVD player. Private car, DVD player, ride sharing, Makati Cinema Square, Green Hills. Stabilize it, incentivize it, and you'll see the magic happen. Now, how do we incentivize it? Because in theory, if we could get everyone to share their ride, we would probably be looking at 20% of the cars servicing 100% of the needs of the private car user. 20% servicing 100%, versus now we have 100% because everyone's lining up in their own cars. It's kind of similar to when you go into a restaurant, you can have a la carte when it's about 50 people. When you have to serve 1,000 people, it's a buffet, right? It's sharing. It's the only way. You can't have a waiter coming up to each, how would you like that steak done? Okay, how would you like your vegetables done? You'd never get your food. Same with the private car. We got to go into that buffet sharing mode. But how do we get people to share? Initially, people will share to subsidize the cost of ownership. You might earn another 10 grand a month, 15 grand a month, 20 grand, depending how hard you work. And that's a decent income for some people. But it's only a certain sector of people that would share for that kind of incentive. The upper middle class, upper middle class, and richer people, for 15, 20,000 pesos a month to share their ride, nah, it's not worth it. Not for my privacy, not for my convenience. So I'll let the other people share their Mirages and Vioses, but me and my Camry or my BMW, I'm cool. You guys share. But what if we dealt with a currency that was valuable to everybody? Time and privileges. What I'm suggesting here is that once we get people, we let ride sharing happen and we incentivize it. And when I say ride sharing, I'm not talking about the government's version right now. I'm not hitting on the government. I'm just saying their version right now is like this. They allow you to ride share, but if you picture YouTube and Facebook, this is where we all go to watch videos. The magic of YouTube is what? The variety. Because you can sit there on YouTube and you'll get sources from all around the globe. It's limitless because we're all sharing. This is why after 30 minutes on YouTube, I guarantee you're going to end up watching a dog on a skateboard. That's just the way it's going to go because that's the kind of material. Now picture YouTube. You can share. Anybody here can share. But you got to get an MTRCB permit first. Is it going to be the same? Of course not. It wouldn't be the same. And this is what we're doing with ride sharing. You can share, but you need mayor's permit, you need DTI, you need franchise, CPC, your mother's blood, kidney sample. It never ends, right? So people are just like, I don't need that in my life, and they're not sharing. So first we got to open it up so that everybody who owns a private car has the capacity to share that. Now, that means opening it up completely from the Mercedeses, even if you have a want to share your Rolls Royce, that's fine, all the way down to the entry-level cars. Even if they're old cars, if they're good enough and safe enough to register, they're safe enough to share. The only one thing we be super duper 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 strict about is the identity of the driver. Security and his identity and his driving record, he or she. That's the only thing we should be super strict about. Once you pass that, you enroll your bank account in your Uber, Grab, or whatever, Lyft, then we know who you are. Chances are you're not going to do anything stupid because we can find you, right? Once you enroll your bank account, you know that that's a very, very good way to find out who that person is. So that's the only restriction. The rest, we let them share. And then we introduce, and I know this is a dirty word, and I'm going to get some filthy looks out there, congestion pricing. Nobody likes it. I know that. However, we're dealing with a finite resource, which is space. And if you fly during Holy Week to Boracay, go home for Christmas, you're going to pay more, right? You know that. We accept it with hotels and airlines, but we can't grasp the concept with cars on the road. Unfortunately, it's the same thing. So now, you create this congestion pricing, and you start off with places like EDSA, C5, Commonwealth, and eventually, maybe even have it all around the Metro Manila. Entry points to Metro Manila, etc. Now, nobody likes to pay, but you don't have to pay. How? Share your ride. We link up your profile. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I've spoken to some who are, and they say, in theory, nothing wrong with your plan, in theory. We link up your profile. If you're sharing your ride and you have a Grab or Uber account, and we know you share 100 times a month, 200 times a month, it's there. I can see it when I book my Grab driver, Uber. He's done 4,000 trips. He has a 4.8 rating. So it's already there. What we'd have to do is link it to that profile of your RFID. So when your car is now registered, we know who you are. Not necessarily who you are by person, by name. I don't really care who's in the car with you, what you had for breakfast. We don't know that. We don't care. What we want to know is your profile as a road user. If you're sharing your ride 100 times a month, you have a good driving record. Once you enter the gantry system and it understands Caroline's got a good driving record, 4.8, shares her ride 100 times a month, she shouldn't have to pay congestion pricing. Same way as when I go into the Mabuhay Lounge and stuff, I use my card. It allows me that because I fly with them regularly, or whatever airline. They're rewarding me for my loyalty to their company. Now we're rewarding people for their behavior on the road and how responsible they are as road users. So that tier is refreshed every month. So if you stop sharing, you lose your privileges. But you want to share more? So now the guy who's got his BMW, Mercedes, or whatever, who wouldn't have shared for $10,000 a month, but all of a sudden, we open up an ASEAN-style lane like they did when the summit. Remember all that drama when somebody tried to get in that lane? Won't mention any names anymore, but because everyone was like, I want to be in that lane. Well, you can. Just be a platinum member. So now it's as valuable to the guy who owns his little Kia Pride from the 1990s as the guy who owns his Rolls-Royce, BMW, whatever. Because now we're dealing with time, which is all relative. Give them the perks. So now people are encouraged to share their rides. And if they do that, we will have revolutionized that space using technology. Because now that we've reduced them down to 20%, that's the theory. You have not just reduced the amount of cars on the road, but you've reduced or increased the quality of drivers. It's almost as if we've outsourced the chore of driving to this 20%. Now the regulatory bodies can now be a little bit more demanding on that 20%. Not in a bad way, but just, hey, you're now getting privileges because you share your ride. You're now getting discounts on this, or you're getting your time saved from that. But because you're only 20% now, we'll require you, can you please put a dash cam in your car? We want everyone to have a dash cam, so nobody's driving blind. And the reason that we want dash cams in every car is because we want to influence driving behavior. A lot of the other source of congestion is because people behave like keyboard warriors in their car. That's what people are like behind the steering wheel. It's like they are now behind keyboards. They're angry because they don't feel accountable. Make them accountable. When you walk into an airport, aren't you a little bit more behaved? Casino, bank? Because you know CCTV's there. But if there's no CCTV, people start taking a leak on the wall and doing whatever. They wouldn't do that when they know they're being watched. So we want to create things like that. Have dash cams in every car. You can ask people for that because you've now professionalized that segment. And that's the goal that I'm trying to get to, is to try to at least maximize at least one space. Just because we can't solve the whole problem doesn't mean we don't tackle one. It's like if you're in a manufacturing process. You go to somebody's factory and you say, I can improve this assembly line by 12%. No brainer. What we're doing is we're improving the private car sector and private car addiction by up to 80%, 70%. Hey, if it's 50%, we're still 50% better off. If it's 20%, we're 20% better off. And this is the idea we want to share, because later on, not just do you help by saying we've revolutionized this space, but you will encourage developers and forward thinkers to now come forward with other solutions that we never knew were even possible. We didn't know what Uber and Grab were before this. I mean, before they arrived, it was a concept that was foreign to all of us. Who's to know or say that the next Uber or Grab wonderful idea for jeepneys is not around the corner? But there's no incentive for them to develop this because, well, the regulatory bodies will treat them like they're doing something wrong, when we should be treating them like they're doing something right. This is how we should be tackling at least this space. And then the nice part about this idea is it doesn't infringe on any other plan. You want to build a bus rapid transit system? Go for gold. Mass rapid transit system and subway, go for gold. It all complements each other. We're just getting rid of this very inefficient space, and we're turning it into something that can actually help everybody. And the best part about it is we're trying to we just want to get to the stage where we've just maximized every stream, whether it's the buses, the jeeps, and the private cars. That's just one of many crazy ideas I have. But hey, we're having a question and answer portion. I've only got a couple of minutes left for this, so I'll save a lot of it for your questions, because I'm not pitching it as the perfect solution, but it's got to be the launch pad of a conversation that we really do need to have as a country, definitely in Metro Manila and Metro Cebu. So if anyone has any questions, I guess we can open the floor now.
Hey, big round of applause, please. What can ADB do to get all of us here as staff to start doing that for ourselves? Actually, I live in BGC, and some friends of ours started a WhatsApp carpool. And there's enough people in it that, who's leaving at 5, who's leaving, somebody's leaving at some point. It's quite disorganized, but it works pretty well. So there's about 3 or 4 of us who decided to sell our car as a result. Anyway, but in general, is there something that like the management could do to encourage people? I know in some companies they give you credit if you use your bike, to get this going, at least for some of us.
That's a great question, and you're right. I'm also part of, in another talk that I had, I've tried to pressure legislations to increase the building code for them to have showers, infrastructure for your bikes, etc., to promote alternative forms of transport. So ADB, they could do that among just themselves with their employees, encourage, let's say, a WhatsApp. It could start with a WhatsApp group, or you could probably even work with companies like Wonder or Waze is introducing carpool, but it's in the States so far. They don't have that here. But I've talked to them about us being the second country to introduce it, and they're very excited about it. But they're scared too, because there's very unclear policies on car sharing or carpooling here And the LTFRB did come up with a warning, no, not a warning, a threat, saying we'll close you down. So that has to be, I was trying to soften it a bit, but that has to be done first there, that the government needs to calm our fears, saying that they're not going to go after you. Then we can start with a company, I think it's 3,000 people work here, is that roughly? 3,000 people is a great start. You have a company-initiated carpool program like that, either through WhatsApp or Waze, and then you start encouraging it and rewarding your employees, showing them that this is the better way forward. And then if it does work here, as a bank, you could start also talking to the government and saying, maybe we'll get behind this gantry system that you talk about, because that will take some investment. I know Singapore is already introduced or interested in helping us with this gantry system. So there are plenty of ways, but it starts with that, actually being a user first.
Next question, please. In the back.
Hi, James. Thank you for your talk. I presume one of the reasons that the Land Transport Authority is not so keen on ride sharing is that they will lose revenue. What if we offset that by raising fines for violations by, let's say, a factor of 10?
Excellent idea. I think that's something I've been pushing for even before the car sharing thing came in. Fines, the responsibility of driving has got to be raised up. We sometimes pander too much to, and this is going to be a controversial thing, and I don't mean it to be, but because there's such a socioeconomic divide that sometimes when you target somebody, it's, oh, it's anti-poor. No, it's not. It's just, you shouldn't be breaking the rules regardless of your financial capacity. So we raise the standards. When I would propose to raise the registration, raise the licenses, raise the fines, so the cost of entry for driving is up here. Then they'll say, but wait, hang on, that's anti-poor because now the jeepney driver can't afford to, or the taxi driver can't afford. It's going to be difficult because we're going to have to go backwards. But if you look at it, you could also say, well, so is being a doctor. That's anti-poor. We require you to go through 8 years of medical school. That's not right. That should be accessible to everyone. They're like, no, if this guy's going to cut me open with his knife, I want him to go through 8 years. Well, a car can do far more damage than a bad doctor. It's a weapon in the wrong hands, isn't it? So why do we have such a low entry point for that? No, we shouldn't. We should start raising it. Now, it's almost impossible to do that now because we have millions of people out there driving and they're all doing their own thing, which is why the 20%, reducing it down to 20% is part of getting to that process where we can now, it's easier to demand more from this 20% to raise the standards. Does that make sense at all? Rather than trying to hit 100% saying everybody's got to go for the retest. They'll be spending money at the LTO trying to buy their way out of it, etc. And then we'll just be back to square one. But if we professionalize it and we start using programs like this, I'm talking about private car sector, but if we develop it for the public sector as well, we're now reducing it to a number that's manageable. And more importantly, we know who they are, they're accountable. We can start making more and more demands and start raising the cost of entry for driving in this country because it should be a privilege, not a right.
Next question, please. Sit here.
With your proposal, it sounds like there's strong incentives for people to become drivers. First question is, how do you protect the drivers? It's one thing to protect the passengers.
Yes, sir.
And then the second question is, this is quite complicated. Why not just congestion pricing?
Congestion pricing, if we don't sort out the number of cars coming through, it could work, yeah, definitely. I just find that it's a two-pronged approach because we can make more demands of people if we just outsource it to a smaller number. So that's why I'm all for that, because I think the anonymity behind the wheel is a huge part of the effect of traffic. And also for safety, because people are driving really badly out there. But if everyone was tagged with an RFID, it would be easier to sort of trace them, make demands on them. The first part of your question was drivers, yes, okay. Make the same demands of people. So you want to now become a passenger in a Grab or Uber, you have to go through the same requirements as a driver just once. We just need you to enroll either a bank account or something that go through, like you don't even need the bank account anymore. There's these credit cards like the PayMayas and the similar thing. I think Gcash is the same. You don't actually have a bank account, but you have to go through a BSP level of authentication for your identity. Just that. So that you are not a ghost. When you enter that car, it is clearly marked to your profile. And that way, it's not foolproof. Nothing is foolproof. But the chance of you doing something really stupid when it's linked to your bank account, your credit card, your Facebook, and all the basic identities, it's not worth it. If it's you getting in the car. We can protect it from, of course, I mean, there's nothing foolproof, but just because it's not foolproof doesn't mean we don't do it, because there are going to be situations where somebody might be stealing your phone and booking a car. But once again, we drop the number down to such a small, manageable level. And then we continue to just zero in on fixing that problem. But it'll address most of it, I think, once we establish the identity of the users as well. And then we just have to I keep saying raise the standards, because if we just keep saying, well, it's hard because people are poor, they will remain to be poor because it just keeps it, well, we know the cycle will just continue. Because you're just ensuring them, you're guaranteeing that poverty because you're ensuring that nothing will change. So people are generally comfortable with no change at all. It's up to the government departments to start pushing a better standard and saying, no, we deserve more, you deserve more. It's going to hurt in the beginning, but the rewards are going to be worthwhile.
We have time for one more question. Who wants to ask the last one? Bruno. Just 1 second. We really need the microphone.
Everyone is raising options, so here are my two options. Point-to-point buses, which we're starting to see now in the Philippines, in Manila at least. And the second one, synchronization of traffic lights. Yes, no?
Okay. I love the bus part. The bus part is really good, because what I love about the P2P buses is it will have an impact once again on the private car market. Because you'll open up the demographic to people who would have normally not taken a bus. In the same way that Grab and Uber opened it up to people who normally wouldn't take a taxi. So they never ate, I don't think they ate, there's probably a crossover, but negligible versus the amount of people that said, I would have never taken a taxi, but hey, this is a good option. Now they send it to their parents. They sometimes send their kids to school. So the P2Ps, I would keep encouraging that, because it will now reduce the impact of private cars. Synchronizing traffic lights, wow. I think we can tackle world peace first. That's probably easier. In theory, you're 100% right, though. We can start with cities, like the manageable cities like BGC. We can start there, but it's a long process, but I do support it. I think it's a great idea.
We actually have time for one more question. Who'd like to ask that? Last chance. Okay, VP.
Thank you for a nice presentation. I'm a bit off-track questions. I believe that you have traveling around the world. Can you name one city at the size of Metro Manila in the developing countries that you think have a livable transportation?
That has a what?
Livable transportation.
Livable. Bangkok, I thought Bangkok was even worse at one point than Manila. When I used to travel there earlier on, I thought it was chaotic. And look what they did. So they have turned themselves around. Their MRT, or it's a BRT, what do they call it? The MTR there, I think. Their mass transit system, their elevated walkways, their flyovers, they really invested because they realized earlier than we did, and they thought a little bit further ahead than we did, that they're going to hit a national crisis. Because I say national, it happens in Metro Manila, but it affects the whole country because how much of the economic activity is in Metro Manila. If we can't move, we all suffer. So that's why it really has to be prioritized. I would use Bangkok as one because Singapore, obviously, it's just so small. It's so much easier to implement things over there. But Thailand is massive. Jakarta, I haven't spent enough time in Jakarta to evaluate how effective theirs is as a whole. But I know that they've done wonders in ride sharing and also the motorcycle ride sharing. Now, just before we run out of time, the motorcycle ride sharing, I think, is ideally, I wouldn't want people to ride in the back of a motorcycle for public transportation, but it's unrealistic to think that people are not doing it already. So it's not a question of whether I think it's a good idea that we should open it up. The question should just be regulated or not regulated. It's like telling young children not to go out, and you know where I'm going with this, right? It's a mixed audience, so I'll just keep it right there. But instead of that, we just teach them how to be responsible about it, because it's going to happen.
Let's give a big round of applause for James. Thank you so, so, so much.